What's up, everyone? So we're going to be working into block 2 now of writing my 15-week free intermediate program. That's the update to the one I put out a couple years ago. So this is definitely a video that goes along with the video I released just prior to this. So it's probably only going to make sense if you watch that one. So if you haven't watched that one already, definitely give that a watch first. See the general framework and setup of kind of how we produce the first block and how that's going to work into this next block, because a lot of things are going to start to carry over, make a lot more sense as we work into blocks 2, and then obviously the next video working in the block 3. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. All right, so let's get into block 2. I already have tabs here, mainly just kind of outline what I'm gonna be doing here. But what we're gonna do here is we're just gonna copy this. So, or duplicate. So we're gonna duplicate. We're actually going to delete this. Rename this. Because for writing these multiple training blocks, I mean, we're carrying over a lot of what we did from the prior training block. So there's no reason to like all of a sudden rewrite the entire thing. I actually made that mistake earlier in my coaching career, thinking I always got to do these new training blocks. I got to make it look cool. It's got to be different. And not realizing that, like, especially in the sense of like this 15-week structure leading into a meet, there probably shouldn't be that much that's changing. Because if there's that much that's changing, we don't know what's going on. We don't, if we see these peaks and valleys of performance, we don't know why. We aren't adapting to kind of the setup or the volume or the workload very well. So there shouldn't be too many grand changes. So the only thing I'm going to do here, though, so we've copied and pasted, we've got our block 2. I'm going to delete weeks 2 through 5, just because that's definitely, I mean, that's not what we're going to be working with right now. We're going to be going back to week 1 and kind of restructuring some things there. So let's delete those. Let's delete the weights, because we won't need those anymore. You can delete that range there. And again, like I said, we're just kind of working back to a general framework again of what we did. But within that, it's still going to be somewhat simpler. So one of the things we're going to do here is, first off, we're going to be progressing some of the exercises, specifically the competition movements, and getting a little bit more specific as we get into blocks 2 and 3. As I mentioned in block 1, our goal was kind of to push rep variations a little bit more, to kind of be able to go to higher relative intensities, work on variations that I think have good carryover. If you've watched my videos on my top 3 variations, you'd understand kind of like why I generally like pause squats or pause deadlifts or tempo bench in particular tend to be fairly universally beneficial for most people. So that's why I chose those. This is a template. I'm not choosing things that are like maybe work for some people and maybe don't for others. I'm choosing things that are fairly universally beneficial, because this is trying to appeal to the broad audience and spectrum and stereotype of what most people can do. So, but within that, we're going to get more specific. So we're going to go to comp squatting twice a week, but we're going to bring those pause squats down to that secondary day and then make this primary day just regular comp squats. Same thing to an extent with bench press. We're going to make 2 competition bench press days, and we're going to change Larson close grip to regular competition bench press. So, I mean, this is part of progressing, is not only progression of weights, progression of like a relative intensity, or rep schemes or whatnot, but progressing variations, because if we're taking away some of these self-limiting aspects, it's going to just therefore increase the average load on the bar and the volume, because if you're using an exercise that uses more weight, that alone is going to increase the volume tolerance. So with it as well, we're going to be doing pause deadlifts over to that secondary day. You're going to see a little bit how I'm going to adjust this in a second, and then we're going to go to your regular competition deadlift, whatever that may be, sumo or conventional, on this secondary day. All right, so within that, let's see what else I might be changing exercise selection-wise. So incline, we're going to leave that for incline dumbbell bench, pull down of choice, row of choice, belt squat we're leaving, dumbbell, all that we're leaving. And even the hamstring, I debated last block, I even kind of mentioned if I was going to change the hamstring curl of choice as we went along. Debating that one. Let's just leave that in there for sake of ease. It's going to be a tough one to be able to kind of pull out and do. I was thinking about doing something like a dumbbell RDL, but I think we'll be completely fine with how I'm going to be leaving RDLs in here, at least for this block and coming blocks. So All right, so we've got a little bit of a different structure in here instead of in sense of rep schemes. So now we've got to go to exercise selection. So one of the things we are going to be doing here is we are going to be adding some singles in here. So I got to add some columns. So we've got a single added to competition squat. So I just added in, everything else is going to kind of go along with it. We're going to add in a single for bench press. And we're going to add in a single for deadlift. Actually, for deadlift, we're going to do something a little bit different because of that. We're going to add in a single, but we're going to be adjusting the back offsets because of that. So the single is in sense changing an average intensity to an extent instead of having that middle back offset. So just for deadlifts, we're going to be doing that. The rest we should be fine to keep the same general structure we've already had. So all right, so let's go through rep schemes. So one thing that's not going to change a ton on this primary squat day is I'm actually going to leave that top triple. The reason why, you might say, oh, you're just using the same rep schemes. Yeah, kind of. But one thing that's changing here is the average load, or the absolute load. Not the average load, the absolute load and the average load, because we're going from pause squats to a regular squat. So we're kind of transferring that over and coming from triples there to triples here, but we're decreasing total volume a little bit by changing those back offsets to 4s instead of 5s. And then here, we're going to adjust a little bit of going down to 5s on both days, or on both sets here. So a top set of 5 followed by 5s, because we're going to be changing, or kind of matching the average, or the average volume on that day. So 4s and 6s are going to equate to a certain average volume, and instead of doing a big global change here in the sense of average volume, we're going to just kind of manipulate by having that rep scheme go up a little bit on the top set, the rep scheme go a little bit on the down set, so we maintain average volume, so there's not a massive volume fluctuation. Because if you know something about me, is I tend to use set count as how I calculate volume. So I don't change that. So if I don't change that, if I'm making adjustments to rep counts, I have to then, a lot of times on those back offs or the top sets, make adjustments so that we're not having these big volume fluctuations. Obviously, as we get closer to the meet, there's going to be a little bit, but we're going to find kind of what the athlete responds to and stick to a similar kind of volume load throughout most training blocks by adjusting these sets to kind of match that. So we've got our setup for squat. Let's move on to deadlift. So I'm actually going to keep that top triple, and similar, I'm going to bring that down to a 4 just to decrease the total loading a little bit on that main deadlift day. And then RDLs are going to come down to a 7. Actually, we're going to have 2 columns of RDLs here. Are going to come down to 7s. And what we're going to do here, pause deadlift clusters. Cluster. 45-second rest between each set. So we're going to have 4 clusters of 2 on pause deadlifts. So actually, let's go 5 by 1. We're going to do singles. I think that was a little bit too much of a volume change. That was going to be, I mean, while it's the similar volume, RDLs and pause deadlifts are not the same. We can't count that as all the same. So 4 by 2, even though it's equating the volume of the set of 8, we're going to drop down a little bit to 5 by 1 for that cluster. What this is going to do is it's going to be a slight taper of where we're going to slowly start to increase the amount we're actually deadlifting and decrease the RDL work. But these clusters are going to allow kind of a specificity of practicing that single in our setup for skill practice while getting the majority of our volume for those RDLs is kind of the thought process there. So, all right, so working into bench press. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to have a top set of 4 followed by the rest 4s. We're going to change the sets around over here to 5s. Actually, I take that back. We're going to do a top double, and that's actually going to change back and forth throughout the block. You're going to see that. So literally, like I said, I'm writing this as we're going along. I don't have this planned out. So there's things I'm kind of making decisions on. I'm going to go back and forth on as we're writing this, kind of ideas of kind of how I want to fluctuate volume and whatnot. So you can see here, since we now have comp bench on both days, this is now swapped that this is kind of not only the lower rep day, but obviously the higher weight day. than the secondary day, where on block 1, that wasn't the case, mainly because of the tempo. We kind of flip-flop that in that sense. So we're bringing that back around now to where there's a single, a double, and sets of 4, and then the other day we have sets of 5, and then we're gonna bring these Larson comp benches down to sets of 7. So I think that takes care of all of the competition movements. So now we gotta go to the accessories. These are pretty simple. We're just gonna do some slight rep drops as we go along. So bringing down 2 reps on an incline dumbbell bench, and then pull downs by 1 rep. We're going to bring belt squats or leg press down by 2 reps each. Dumbbell bench by 1. We're going to bring this down by 2 reps. And we're going to bring this down by 1 rep and 2 reps. So you can kind of see there, obviously, if I was starting at 10s, I brought that mainly down by 1 rep, because accessory, I'm probably not going to go below 6s. I'm usually going to keep between 6 and 12 reps, and it's going to depend on the accessories and the point. Like this dumbbell bench on the primary day, I don't mind that getting that down to 6s by the next block, for a reason we're trying to kind of push those pretty strong, heavy. Like that's meant to be an intensifier of intensity, not only just the hypertrophy element, but an intensifier of intensity. So I don't mind bringing that down. But for the most part, the other ones are satisfying more of the hypertrophy aspect. So we're going to keep that more in kind of that 8 to 10 rep range. So if I had started at 12, I'm bringing it down 2. So most things are going to be around 6 to 8 by that final block, where this block, most things are around like that 7 to 10 area. So I'll apologize. I'm probably going to start losing my voice here, because I'm going to be talking for like 5 hours straight here. So if I'm getting raspy, that is why. Okay. So outside of that, not much else is going to change. This might be something different for other coaches. I don't really change these intensities on the accessories. I keep those pretty standard throughout blocks for a couple reasons. One, I don't think accessories are overly fatiguing in most of these, at pushing to the kind of the 8 to 7 RPE for the most part. Maybe I'm going to tell people once we get to kind of this peaking block mode, maybe take, like if you are doing the peaking block, like not the regular block 3 I'm going to show eventually, but the peaking block, maybe we need to be a little bit more conservative and just kind of maintain on those. But otherwise, I mean, they're there for a reason. We're trying to create adaptations through them up until the point where we want to start pulling them back, which you'll see if we're peaking, we're going to start pulling those out, especially the last like 3 weeks or so. But otherwise, I keep those pretty standard in the same ranges, because we're also changing rep schemes, so the progression model should be there just by changing rep schemes from the last block. So, all right. So we've got that template set up. Obviously, this is a lot easier to program this block because we're starting with already a framework to work off of, and we're just adjusting that a little bit. I'm keeping a lot of the same back off setups in place, mainly because if we start changing too much with back off setups, I think the only one I did was for deadlift. We start changing that too much, it starts to muddy the water a bit on what's like happening. Like, do we really know what's working? Like we can't change too much, or else we're going to have a program that's going to give too many variable manipulations that then we don't know why those variable manipulations are, or like those variables in performance are happening if there's too many variables kind of compounding. So just some very slight adjustments with rep schemes and with exercise selection, but for the most part keeping that framework the same, because once we kind of find that microcycle that works, we're going to keep running that microcycle for the most part over and over with different kind of permutations and variations of it. Obviously this is a template, so I can't say this is the perfect microcycle, but again, like I'm writing this as in the sense of like this would be my opinion of a perfect microcycle and mesocycle and macrocycle for a general population of just the average lifter. So this is why we're kind of keeping this framework throughout. So let's copy and paste this all the way through for weeks 4 into week 5. Let's bring those exercises over. That looks all good. Okay. Let's start programming. So let's go with squat first. You probably see I just like squats. You see I always kind of start with squats, and it's just probably because of a bias of liking it, as well as I think deadlift has, I program more often deadlifts being worked around what squat is doing, like squat being the primary thing we're trying to push versus the opposite. So it makes sense to typically program squat first before deadlifts, because squat is going to dictate somewhat of what you're going to do on the deadlift realm. So all right. So we're going to start having these singles as well. So we're obviously going to have a single, and we're also going to have a top set triple. So understand, like, this is one thing that it's going to be dependent on each lifter, but sometimes you might have a top single and then that's the top set. That's all you're doing. You're not doing anything else. Here we are doing a top single and then a top set. So we're having both. I think most people can tolerate that without too much of an issue, but it's just going to be dependent on each person. So we're going to go up to an 8.5 RPE on that and an 8 RPE on that triple. Easy thing to do now. There's not really a huge reason we need to change the layout of the back off. So I'm going to copy and paste that over. We're only dropping 1 rep though, so I can change that 9.4 to a 9.7. We only need a 3% back off for that. So you can see here, obviously if you plug this in, nothing's calculating off of that, but if you plug this in, the back offs are now going to calculate off of that. So one thing you're going to see here, we have an 8.5 RPE single. That's going to be a decent little jump from the other weeks. Reason for that is I look at this week 4 as kind of a test, especially if you're using this to peek into a meet. If this was working into a meet, you're about, what, like 7 weeks out at that point. We need a good idea of kind of where strength levels are at leading into that final block so we have good expectations. But we don't need to hang around that the entire block. It'll work just to have that mainly leading into that that last week. So we have 7 RPE on those singles to keep those pretty consistent. It may be the same weight. You may be able to progress a little bit because of the adaptation and feeling a little better in practice leading into week 2. 7.5 week 3, and then 8.5 week 4. So there's a big little bump there of kind of jumping a little bit more in the week 4. So we kind of have this test single followed by that 8 RPE triple and a similar framework here for the progression model when it comes to that top triple. So leading into pause squats then, there are going to be a little adjustments of kind of what we did last block. So I am going to kind of go over here, easy thing to do, copy that into this. So we have B3, taking the max. We no longer need the high bar, but we do need a pause squat. So I'm going to do 0.925, and then we have 5, we're going to go to a 7.5 RPE. So 5 at a 7.5 is 799. So we're going to program that as 799. So pause squat at a 7.5 RPE for 5 reps, followed by the back off. We're going to do something a little bit different here. It's going to back off 12%. That's kind of an adjustment from the first block, because the first block we have a little less fatigue accumulated because we're doing a self-limiting variation. There's no single. And then we're doing a variation on the other day. So just generally less fatigue is being induced because the absolute loads are lower. This block is going to be different. The fatigue induced on this day is now higher because there's no variation, and now we've added a single. So to account for that, we're going to still program that top set in a similar average or relative intensity, but I'm going to have that person back off a little bit more to kind of account for the added fatigue on this day, to allow us to recover a little bit more on this day, not induce as much fatigue on this day, to come back around feeling fresh for that day too. So that's where, as we progress through these blocks, things have to change a little bit based on kind of what's happening in sense of that primary day and kind of what we need to accomplish. So just like that other block, last block, we're going to be doing a 3% step down. So really like an RPE step down each time. So 774 is going to go to 751. So kind of give an idea of kind of what I'm doing here. So 5 at a 7.5 RPE is 799. 6.5 is a 774. 5.5 is 751. 4.5 723. Is that right? 77. Oop, no, I need 723 here. Okay, got everything. Stepping up. Okay. Perfect. Program percentage based off of that. One thing I will tell you, if you are running this block, I am programming pause squats here based off of just a general idea of what most people can pause squat. If you run this and after you do this set, this number here, let's say you did like right there, 325. Let's say you did 330, so you got even over that range at an 8 RPE. That's programming you at 382.4. That's definitely not, I mean, that's only equals this divided by this. That's only 0.95. Let's call it 0.95 versus 0.955. That's only 0.95. That's where I start individualizing a program, if I can actually individualize it. So I want to make sure I don't have anything edited here. So what you can do, let's say you know, and you go did that same calculation, you divided this by this, and this is actually accurate, like you know that's actually accurate. what you could do is go to here, go into the program and say, I only need to back off 5% instead of 7.5, delete that, and then be able to kind of customize the program a bit more to kind of what you need. That's kind of what you can do here that'll kind of help you out. So just a little tip there. So, all right, we've got squat program. Let's now go to bench press. So bench press, we can handle higher average intensities on an average basis. So we're gonna do things a little bit different here and bump up the average intensity for all of these days a little bit more than we did the first block. So we are gonna keep probably the same general framework. Let's see if I kind of go through this, kind of what I wanna do. The same general framework for back off percentages and the RPE stop. So we've got a single at a 9 RPE because we can work a little heavier on bench. That's not a max though. That 9 RPE way too often. Actually, let's do this to kind of keep people in check. 8.5 to 9. 9 RPE way too often means for someone to max, and 9 RPE is not a max. That means you can do 2 reps with that. That should still not look very hard. That should look like it's a second attempt almost, which is basically what's gonna happen here. 8.5 to 9 is about a second attempt, but I don't mind pushing this a little bit heavier than squat, mainly because it's bench, and we're gonna be able to recover from that, and you're gonna be able to kind of go into those next sets without nearly as much issue. From there, we've got an 8 RPE top set at 2, and then we've got our fatigue drops down. So we're gonna keep the same fatigue drop percentage. We're gonna go 0.97, so only a 3% drop to like, in sense what it would be a 7 RPE for these sets, and then 0.94 for that 6% drop, going from 2 to 4. And then after that, we've got an 8% drop going down to those final back offs if you need to back off. So here's where things are gonna deviate a little bit from the framework, and especially with these sets a little bit. So one, we're gonna kind of undulate. So we're gonna have a similar drop in RP each week, 8, 7.5, 7, 6.5, but we're also going to do, oops, not the weeks. We're gonna have a bit of, oh, darn, sorry. We're gonna have a bit of undulation there on the rep schemes. So we pushed top triples on the first block. In the very sense of a periodization model, we should do doubles here. But we still got another block to go. We're probably gonna push some doubles here on this final block. But even with that, we could do triples again. People just don't like to. They like to have some variation here. But as well as I wanna kind of match total volume a little bit, so we're gonna rotate those rep schemes week to week a little bit versus what we did on that first block. So what you're seeing here is we have a drop pattern in the RPE similar, but on week 1, we have sets of 4 for the top set, and then a double on week 2, set of 4 week 3, double on week 2. That should be no problem going back and forth between those, because the fact of the matter is you're still going to have that RPE single that's going to maintain skill practice with heavier weights. So you're not going to get like this weird fluctuation of like, oh, I'm going heavier to light, heavier to light. You're always going to have that heavier top set that's going to kind of help to prime that. So with that, we've got the top set there. We'll go, actually, let's go 8 RPE on that. 7.5 here. Actually, let's go 7 both days here. Keep that pretty standard weeks 1 and 2. Kind of get a general framework of kind of where you're at with RP with your top singles. Those very well might progress just from kind of getting a little bit better, but they might be the same. And then we ramp up weeks 3 and 4. So a little bit of a heavier ramp into that. So the one thing we need to change here, not only do we need to change that RPE stop, as I like mentioned last block, we're going to match that RPE stop to that top set there. Other thing we need to do is, since this is a set of 4 and not dropping, we don't need that 6% drop anymore for rep scheme. So we're going to take that out. And so I can take that out. I'm going to apply that to week 3 as well, and that's going to line up no problem. So I'm going to get a little bit of water. Okay, going into that secondary bench day, here's something that's going to be a little bit different that I didn't do last block that I'm going to do here is we're going to try and start raising average intensity a little bit. I think for the most part, People can be able to work at similar intensities on that primary and secondary day on bench press. It's just a little bit of a change we need then in regards to kind of how we back off. So obviously if we're doing fatigue drop on that primary day, the assumption will be that we're going to be having a higher average intensity on those back offs versus backing off here. We're going to be having that step back off, which is going to change a little bit, and we're going to adjust a little bit based off of what we did last block. So we have 8 RPE. You'll see last block we did, copy and paste over and you'll see it. We did a 5% drop. Because we're going up to 8, I'm actually going to do a, we're going to keep something similar here to an extent, but I'm going to do a 7% drop to this middle set. And then I'm actually going to reach this set, just did another 5% drop. I'm going to redo that though, and I'm going to make that to be a 10% drop off of the top set. So if we're looking back to last block, it's the same percentage drop off from this top set to the 3x4. The difference is I changed this by 2% to account for this going up and this goes down. So our peak intensity is going up because of that, while that average intensity is really staying the same, but like that average intensity of the back offs is going down just a touch to kind of account for that top set being heavier and being a bit more top set peak intensity dominant here. So let's go 7 RPE and 6.5. Okay. And then for that middle day, we're going to keep that pretty standard from what we were doing. Actually, let's go again. If you want to see how I program this a bit more in that first video, it's going to show you exactly how I program this. And it very well should precede this video, so it makes sense on everything. But we've got here Larson comp bench, that's the 9.4. We don't have close grip anymore, so we can take away that 0.97 for close grip. And then we need to change that percentage because it's at 7s, and we're gonna go to a 7 RPE. So 7 out of 7 RPE is 7.739. So let's adjust that in. Whoops, 739. Back off is 10%. I'm gonna keep that there as this day still relatively easy, even with that back off not having to drop or anything and other things kind of being higher average intensity on the other days. I'm still good with that. We just need to kind of have the step ladder going down. So 723 for a 6.5 RPE, 0.7 for a 6 RPE, and then 694 for a 6.5 RPE. Let's make sure that all calculated right. 707, 2339. Perfect. Okay. We have our bench program now. Moving on to deadlift. So deadlift's going to be a little bit different. I'm not going to have someone work up to as high of a single. That's even going to go for the peaking block. I mean, to an extent on the peaking block. Deadlift is going to be the most fatiguing. I don't really want to work up to as heavy of a single here. I think we're going to save that more for next block, but an 8 RPE single is still going to give us a really good idea of what we're going to be able to kind of be tolerable of going into that final block. So the other thing I'm going to do here is we are actually going to do a bit more of a step ladder with our competition deadlift and work up to higher intensities here while keeping 0.88 times 0.97. So we got 0.88 is the 12% back off. That's the same thing we had here. We have 0.94, then 0.94. Actually, since I'm doing this, let's go ahead and add that set back in. Again, like I said, I'm writing this in real time, so I'm changing stuff as I go along. So we're going to keep that set of equals MRAP. We're going to keep that middle set in now. I like how that kind of played out with how I'm going to change this a little bit. So 0.94 for the back off percentage, 0.97 because it's a 1 rep difference. That's going to back off 6%, and then we're going to back off another 6% here. Let me make sure I got this right. So 8 RPE, back off 6%, 3% drop, and then we've got another 6% drop. That's lining up pretty close to what we did last block, and I need to add that set back there, bring this over. Okay, so you'll see here, 8 RPE, 8 RPE. That's kind of matching up. We're pushing a top triple again because even though we did a triple last block, that triple was based off of pause deadlift, so I have no issue kind of continuing with that triple, mainly because we're also pushing that top single, but now see what kind of we can do triple wise without that variation. So I think probably people think a little bit too much about rep schemes and having to change those. The fact of the matter is there's not like a magic number. Like you're looking more for kind of the overall dosage of intensity. So the fact of the matter is a triple at a pause deadlift is not the same as a triple on a competition deadlift. Even though it's the same number, it's not the same. So what we're gonna do here now is we're gonna do a little bit of a step drop with that RPE. So 6 to 6.5. So I want that single on week 1 to be pretty easy. It's gonna go to a 7 on week 2, 7.5 week 3, 8 on week 4. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna take that back. We're gonna go 7 on both of these middle weeks and a 6 on the first week. So again, keeping relative intensity on that single on deadlift to not be too crazy. It's gonna be pretty simple and more around that like 7 RPE range for weeks 2 and 3, and then really kind of ramp up week 4 to test a little bit. The big difference here from last block is we are going to be a little bit more of a progression on the step approach of the RPE on that top set. So it's going to start at a 5 RPE and build up 1 RPE each week so that the average intensity week 4 is in sense, or peak intensity is more than week 4 of this block. But to kind of account for that, we're going to have a bigger step approach, but we're also having that single in. Now, one thing I don't have to do is since we're doing, you remember on the block 1, I programmed this off a 12% back off of 7.5, but I programmed this to include another 1.5% back off of a 7 because the back offs were taking a bigger step approach down than the top sets were. We were maintaining a higher peak intensity on a weekly basis, but the back offs were kind of going with. I'm not going to do that here because the top set already has that built into it, so all we need to do is just maintain that same back off percentage going down. So for RDLs, I'll program that first. We're gonna have a similar setup. I usually keep a pretty standard setup for RDLs since they're definitely in the sense of like a competition lift. They're almost, even though they're very high in specificity because we're hinging, they bias almost more towards kind of like a or like an accessory movement. But since you can still use a lot of weight on them and I see a lot of validity in their transfer, I consider them a direct replacement, but they kind of bias a little bit more towards the accessory, which I just feel like you can handle a little bit higher or similar RPEs throughout each week. So from there, we're still gonna drop down a 10% drop. So let's copy that throughout the weeks. So if you remember first block, we're gonna keep the same similar setup, 6 RPE, 6 RPE, 6.5, and then 7 by week 4. The sumo deadlift cluster, we're gonna do percentage based. So I mentioned like RDLs, we're not doing percentage based because it's kind of hard to know what we need to do. But for those pause deadlifts, just like we did on our secondary bench or secondary squat day and our tertiary bench day, we're gonna do percentage based just to kind of keep things standardized with the average intensity on these days so there's not big fluctuations. So we're gonna take the training max of deadlift times 0.925 because it is a pause deadlift, and then we're going to times that by 0.811. So 0.811, obviously pretty easy. In the realm of singles, that's a 4 RPE. But what we're doing here is a cluster. That's going to build on each other. So every single week, that's going to, in the sense of those 5 singles back to back to back with just a 45-second rest, even though the first one might be really easy, by the last one, it still shouldn't be hard, but it should be a little bit harder. Just a little bit of an uptick there. So let me actually see something real quick. Let me decide what I want for this percentage because I know for leading in the next block. So, okay, that's good. We'll keep it there. So then we're going to do a full RPE step drop each week. So that's going to be 3% drop each week as we go down. So 762, and then 5-1, and then 3-9. So like if you're sitting there, we're going to go over here. Obviously, I don't have anything down there. So if you just go to 8-1 here, 8-1-1, 7-8-6, 7-6-2, 7-3-9 for that kind of like 1 RPE step drop. And you'll see here, obviously, it has a pretty big jump some weeks and some versus the others, but that's completely fine because, like I said, if you change this number, it's going to start changing it for each person. And honestly, just like with pause squats, I said on pause squats, like if you notice that the number projects out very different from what your pause deadlift is here, feel free to change that. That's one of the benefits of pushing those triples on these variations is if you know that your pause deadlift is X amount and you know it's only 5% less, we'll go in here and change that 0.925 to 9.5, and then now it's going to customize itself more to what your pause deadlift strength is. I'm programming this as is, but you can always go adjust this based off of what you saw on the previous block, but only adjust it if you truly know that. If you don't know it, don't be going to adjust it. And that kind of leads, I kind of mentioned this a little bit. I have a video, or I have a post on how to adjust training maxes. For the most part, I would keep training maxes pretty similar. Like barring like you made such amazing progress on this first block that you know you have to up those, I probably wouldn't up them in blocks 2 and 3, because make sure, remember, all of your main sets are RPE based here. So those are gonna regulate just based off of you getting stronger. You can auto-regulate those. The only thing that is that isn't regulating based off of RPE is these percentage-based kind of easy days, these secondary or tertiary days. I'm not like super concerned about ramping up that training max to change those, barring we see a significant change that requires it. Otherwise, it's not the worst thing in the world to keep those pretty standardized to the same training max through these 15 weeks. And then maybe if you go rerun it again, then change your training maxes for the next 15 weeks you run it again. So, all right. So I think we've got everything written there, at least for the layout. So we're going to go over the deload week. Similar, I'm going to take these out since we don't really have any top sets. I'm just going to take all of that, and then let's go through. So I'm not going to change anything here. I mean, we had the same, we're going to use the same percentage back off of the deload. So we're just copy that over from pause squat. So it's going to be a 10% drop from the previous week for the deload on intensity. We can copy that all the way down. I can just do that there. We did a 6.5% drop for bench. So I'm going to copy that throughout. And then we did a 15% drop for deadlift. So I'm going to copy that again throughout all these. Let me copy this rep scheme over so it standardizes it. And we're good there. Okay, so we've got all of the weights that are programmed. So now we can go through, let's actually just adjust the accessories. It's going to be very similar. 90% of last week's weight for all of these kind of more compound movements that are going to be a bit heavier and maybe a little bit more fatiguing. And then for these other ones, we're going to do like a 1 RPE drop. So 6 to 7 RPE for the 7 to 8 RPE ones. I'm just going to go copy that throughout. And then for the other ones, we've got at 7 RPE. I think that takes care of all of it. Yep. Okay, and then lastly, just like last block, what I'm typically doing is for bench press, we're taking away 1 rep for each set. I'm taking away 1 set for each accessory. For squat on the primary day, I'm taking away 1 rep. Bench back to 1 rep. Deadlift, since we can't, it's kind of hard to take away a set here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit more of a drop in reps here. So that's going to standardize the same volume drop as kind of just taking away an entire set. It's a little bit more of a drop by taking away 2 reps here, because even though it's sets, we've got 5 by 1. It's in sense 5 total reps. I'm taking away 2 reps, and 1 rep to kind of account for taking away a little bit more volume. And then we're going to take away 1 set here for belt squat. Bench, single, and then triples to account for that. I'm not going to change anything for that single because we're not going to take that away. Can't adjust the reps or anything there. And then make sure to equate the fatigue drop sets. So if we got the fatigue drop sets, we're equaling that. So whatever you put in here is going to transfer over to the deload week. We're going to drop 1 set for the accessories. Moving into the competition squat on the secondary day, we're going to drop a rep and a set. So that kind of gets us to that like 60-ish% of volume range. We're going to drop a rep and a set from deadlift, and then dropping a set from the hamstring curl and face pulls. So last thing we got to do here, or last 2 things, we've got to go through. Let's actually go up here first. Something that's pretty, and let's see if it's easy. I might need to change it a little bit. So squat is calculating, we want it now to calculate off of the single, because that's going to be by far the most accurate. Now we've got a really good estimated 1RM, so I just need to change that to the single. So all I got to do is change it from 29 to 28. That should change it over. Yep. So I just got to go through all of these and change it to 28. And then I got this, I'll change it to 28 and take away that -2, because we don't need that -2 anymore because it's now a single. Like we don't need to do that anymore because we're not calculating off a triple, we're calculating off a single, so it's going to be accurate. So same thing here, it's going to go to 45, 45, 45, 45. And then we're going to take away the -2 because it's going to be a single, and we're going to go to the right thing there. Okay, so 58. Oop, that didn't go right. Where's that calculating off of? Oh, that was actually calculating off the right spot. Whoops, don't even need to change that. Okay, that's actually already on the right spot, so that's good. I just need to take away the -2 since it's a single. And then we need to go into the ranges. So let's add those in. So let's start with squat. So if I was programming this percentage based, it would be the squat max, so B3 up there. That's our competition squat, so we don't need to do anything else other than that, times a single at an 8.5. So a single at an 8.5 is 939, rounding, or 0.939, rounding to the nearest 5. And then, so that in a sense would be the number I'd program if it was just straight up percentage based. But you're obviously, as you saw last block, we're gonna do above 3% and then below 3% to give us this nice little range there. Obviously 375 is basically working out to 10 pounds above or below that. We also need to do the triple. So that's gonna be 863. And going to program that in. Now we'll copy and paste this throughout and then start adjusting based off of each week. So if we're going to a 7.5 here, that's going to drop it to 907. This is going to drop to 8.5. If we're going to a 7 RPE, that's 892 for a single. That's going to go to 837 for a triple at a 7. And then we're going out, I copy and paste that because we're staying at a 7 RPE. It doesn't change really. We're still kind of within the same general range. It's just maybe on the second week we can go a little bit higher within that range because you've kind of adapted to that first week and gotten used to that single stimulus and the skill practice of it. We are going down on that triple load to a 6.5 RPE, so we will bring that down. Okay, so we've got squat worked out. I'm just going to copy and paste that actually because it's going to be somewhat similar. Where's it at? Somewhat similar for deadlift. We just need to change it to the deadlift column, which is B5. So B5, actually I'll just delete this. So B5 single at an 8 is 922. So let's adjust that. And then RPE 8 for a triple, 863. And then let's bring that all the way through the weeks and then go adjust. So we're bringing down to a 7, so that means 892. And I already know that's going to be the same for week 2, so I'm just going to copy and paste over. And then we got to bring this down to a 7 RPE triple, so that's going to be 837. And then we're going to 811 for a 6 RPE triple. And then the last one, I'll just continue with this. That's going to go down to 786 for a 5 RPE. And then for a 6 RPE single, we're going to be at 863. Okay, got ranges for deadlift now. Final one we've got is for bench press. Let's just copy these up here and adjust them a little bit. So bench press is going to be B4. I'm going to give a little bit more range here. I gave 8.5 to 9. So what I'm going to do is the top end range of 9, which would be 955. And then the bottom end range of an 8.5 RPE, 939. So you're going to see because of that, whoops, I got to change that over to bench. It's going to give me a little bigger range than if I did it and it wasn't 8.5 to 9 and I just put 9. Just a little bit bigger because of that. So let's copy this over. So a double at an 8 is 892. You can, like I said, you can always refer to this RPE chart to see kind of why I'm doing this. I have most of these memorized by now from doing it so often. So you can always go back to kind of see like 2 at an 8, 892. So let's copy these all the way through and then adjust. So week 3 goes down to an 8. So that's going to be 922 on both of those. 7.5 at a 4. So that's going to be a decent little difference there. That's going to be 824. 824. Actually, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna copy this over to week 1 since that's gonna be an adjustment. So obviously there's gonna be a little bit to that. Oops, that's why it didn't calculate right. There's obviously gonna be a bit of a difference in the top set here versus here with that kind of adjustment in reps. So, okay, coming down here, we go into an 8 RPE, 892, 892. So I'm just gonna copy that because that's actually gonna be the first week as well. This is gonna come down to a 7 RPE at a 6, that's 863, or a 7 RPE for 2 reps. Sorry, I don't even know what I'm saying there. It's gonna be 863. And then we've got 4 reps at a 6.5 RPE. Let me make sure I'm right on this. 4 at a 6.5, 799. And we should be good there. All right, last one. Let's copy this up. We only need 1 of these because we're going to this top set on the main day. We're going to a 5 RPE, or 5 reps at an 8 RPE. I can't talk anymore, which is going to be 0.811, so 81.1%. And let's copy this through and adjust. So 799. 786 and 774. Okay, double check everything. I think I've got everything already in there. We're not doing a range for RDLs because that's just going to be a little bit too tough to kind of dictate. We've got our ranges for our singles, for our top set rep work. Everything else is programmed in. I don't need to, actually I do need to do this. So we now have singles, so we have added sets. So you can see here, that's equated in the volume, but now I don't have that equated in the volume. So I need to add the squat, bench, I need to add that single, deadlift, I need to add that one and that one to be able to get those out to calculate right. So I'm going to bring those across all values and we are good. That is block 2. All right, that wraps up the second block of weeks 6 through 10. We're getting a little bit more specific, as you saw, working in some singles into our movements, getting more and more comp specific with our top sets and our primary day variations. And that's really going to kind of give us kind of a good framework to build into that final block, because understanding everything's kind of leading in this final block. Each block in itself, we're trying to accomplish certain tasks, but these things are progressing in certain manners to kind of reach this final block to kind of then kind of push strength to its highest output, or in sense, peak or test for a meet. So next up with that last video, I'll be finishing block 3, and then I'll also show and adjust if it was a peaking block, what I'd be doing. So we'll have in sense 2 blocks for the next one I'll be going over with the block 3 and then the optional block 3 peaking block to kind of wrap up this video series and this programming of this 15-week intermediate program. So if you have any questions, feel free to comment below, like, share, and subscribe. Make sure to kind of, I do this to kind of put out as much information as possible so aspiring coaches or just lifters who want to know more about what is going into their program can understand that. So the more people that know, the more knowledgeable our community as a whole can be. So make sure to share with friends if you think you got a lot out of this. And otherwise, I'll talk to you all later.